What's going on, YouTube? Something a little bit different today. We're going to review this printer. This was sent by GearBest.com. It's the Hoony H8. Don't know if that's how you actually say it, but it is now because it's my video. So I thought about doing the whole review with this thing printing in the background, but it sounds like there's two jackhammers right next to my head. So I think what we're going to do is we'll pause the print, as that is a feature on the printer. It'll take a second, apparently a long second. It's just there. Okay, yeah, that sounded good. So I did receive this printer from GearBest.com. No money exchanged hands. This printer is for review purposes only. I am allowed to keep the printer after the review process is over, and that review process has been very, very nice. They haven't said anything. They've allowed me to have creative freedom in the process and said, say anything that you think you should about this printer. So let's let her rip. First off, I've had the printer now for about 2 weeks or so. There's a few kind of glaring things we'll need to go over here first, but I think I should probably tell you my goal with this review process and with reviews going forward, if this is something that the channel evolves into. Reviews, I'm not going to tell you to buy or not to buy the printer. I don't think that's my place. My place is to give you the information and those data that you would then use to make an informed decision if you felt like you would want to purchase a machine. So going forward, if you're going to look for, you know, a 7 out of 10, or you're going to look for a 9 out of 10, and then you're going to say, well, Elliot told me to buy it. It's not the video for you, man. It's just not. You know, click off if you want, but it's just not going to be that way. I'm going to tell you my experience with the printer. If you deem that that's worthy of your money, then that decision is yours. So buckle up, cowboy. We're in for a bumpy ride. First off, the listing for this machine on GearBest.com says that it is a heated bed. This machine, I repeat, not a heated bed. Not a heated bed. Now, before you click off the video and say, what are you kidding me? It's over $200, no heated bed. Here's the thing. The nearest competitor without a heated bed is probably the Tron XY X1. That's coming in at about $130 realistically shipped to the United States. That one also has a self-contained power unit. You don't have to wire mains power anywhere. So it is kind of comparable to this as like a makerspace printer. This printer is 210 by 210 by 240 millimeters. So the nearest competitor, I believe, in that kind of size space is the ANET A8 that comes in at a lower price point with a heated build plate. So let's talk about a little bit about the unboxing experience. Very similar to any other unboxing experience you've had before. The packing materials are pretty much standard this day and age for 3D printers. Packed very well. Nothing out of the ordinary there. No damage in shipping at all. At least I couldn't tell that there was damage in shipping. I did have some major issues during the installation of different parts of this printer. It turned out I actually had less bolts than I should have. I have a set of M3 bolts. I keep those on hand for everything, and everything that's anything 3D printed related always uses M3 bolts. So screws and bolts. So what I did is I assembled the printer with those. I think I used around 8 or 9, so I was missing those in the initial packaging. So throughout all the B-roll of this video, if you see a black bolt anywhere, that was my replacement. This machine comes with 2 tools. Well, I guess 3 if you count a small Allen wrench. It comes with an Allen wrench hex key. Same thing. Also comes with a screwdriver, that basic standard screwdriver, I suppose, a Phillips head, and also a small slot head screwdriver. Now, this is all you need for installation of this printer. The problem is it's just for installation of this printer. So this printer itself does not come with a scraper, and it does not come with a pair of flush cutters or spare PTFE tubing, even spare thermistor, acupuncture needle to clear the nozzle, none of that, not even a spare nozzle as well. So very basic what you receive in the kit. The printer itself is half assembled. The black portions of the printer, as you can see here in the background, those, the Z-axis itself, that is all fully assembled. The printer also comes with 1/2 kilogram of PLA filament in white, which actually comes on a full spool, just half a spool, which is always nice to get a substantial amount of PLA, especially when you want to start printing something right away. It has paper on the acrylic. That's about all I'll say about that. So the instruction manual that comes with this printer is not printed. There is no paper copy within the documents of the printer, but there is a small micro SD card. I think it's a 4 gigabyte. It is Kingston branded. I'm not too sure on that, as I've had some data issues with that SD card recently. But on that SD card has the assembly video and an instruction manual. This manual is not exactly thorough. There are some points at which you need to improvise. So if you're not an improvisational person, I don't know. Maybe watch a time lapse of me putting it together. Probably not going to help you much, but at least it's there. So one of my biggest issues with assembly was the build platform. Now the build platform consists of 4 separate entities. It consists of the aluminum build plate, the platform that holds the plate, a spacer block between the Y carriage and the plate. So total, there's 4 moving parts on this. So in essence, it's kind of like threading a needle through a flock of sheep that are being chased by a wolf, and you're riding a horse. So that brings me to another point, kind of off the cuff here, but on the website it says about a half an hour for assembly. I did not experience that. I did run into some issues, but even just pulling the paper off the acrylic, anybody that has done that will understand that it takes quite a while to do that. So you're not looking at about a half an hour. Realistically, if you're really good at this kind of thing, you're looking at about an hour and a half. So just keep that in mind. Not really a deal breaker for me. I love putting together kits, so it's a great time for me, no matter how long it took. The spool holder, I've had about 40 to 50 hours of print on it, and it has held the spool there. The spool hasn't fallen off at all. It seems to be working really well. There's no major issues with it. It's just the spool holder is just a bolt. It's just an all-threaded bolt. It's just a bolt. So one of my biggest gripes is that all the belts on the printer are proprietary loops. They're not necessarily proprietary to the printer. They are GT2 belts. The problem is they're all looped at a specific size. So both Z-axis belts, they're loops. The Y-axis, it's a loop. And the X-axis, it's a loop. Now the problem with that is that I can't go buy 5 meters of GT2 belt and be set on this printer. I need to find those size belt loops and purchase those. So not the happiest about that. One workaround I found for this is on the carriages. They basically use a tooth assembly to hold the belt in next to the carriage on the Y, Z, and the X. What you could do is run your own belt around there, cut it to where they're just touching, and then secure it into the carriage. So that does work. I have done that on the Y-axis because of a mod that I'll tell you about in a little bit. So I know that does work. The next thing to consider here is that there's no belt tightening capability on the stock Hoony H8. Now this becomes an issue because belts get loose over time. It just happens. That's how it works. So similar to what I was just saying, you're going to need to take the belt, cut small sections off, and piece it in next to the carriage. The only belt that has the ability to be tightened is the X-axis belt. Now this can be tightened with 2 screws on the furthest pulley, the idler pulley, and it works, but it loosens up quite easily, and I had to replace those fasteners that were holding on that bracket for the pulley within the brass X-axis arm. So it does work. I would have really appreciated if the Y and the Z also had this ability, because over time those belts are going to loosen a little bit, and it's going to be added kind of frustration and headache that maybe we don't want to do as 3D printer owners. So I had some issues with some of the end stops on the axis, specifically on the Z axis. I had some issues with the homing ability of that. The way an end stop works is it has this lever, right? And then it has a little ball at the end of the lever. And as that lever, the ball gets hit, the lever comes down and actuates a button. So it becomes much different than if it was actuated on the ball end or the bent end or anything like that. So this is where the Z-axis failed. It didn't go actuate on the ball end. So what you have is it has to come all the way down and hit the lever itself to be actuated. That ends up sending the nozzle 2 or 3 millimeters further of a throw than as it would hit on the actuated ball end of the end stop. So I just went in there, adjusted that, bent it up a little bit, and it actuated at the correct time. Another thing that kind of irritated me a little bit is that there's only one linear rail that secures the bed to the build platform to the actual bed of the printer, and there's a slight wobble. There's not very tight clearance on the linear rail system, so that bed shakes just slightly. Now, the prints that I've been getting off of this so far suggest that this isn't really a big problem. The prints I've been getting so far are pretty good, but that's not this video. Stay tuned for part 2. So the part cooling fan's a little close to the heater block. That becomes a problem when you have to change the nozzle. Any movement in that heater block, it actually starts to melt the part cooling fan. It's a problem. The position of the main board in the case kind of worries me a little bit. There's zero airflow to the main board. I don't think this is a huge problem because, like we said earlier, this is a non-heat bed unit, so there's not a whole lot of amps running through there just for the hot end. I don't think that would be a big issue. If you do upgrade this, there's the potential for that to become overheated. You might need to add either a cooling fan or take it out of the case itself. So on that same kind of tone, the board itself does have areas for heat bed as well as thermistor for heat bed, so I do believe you can throw that on here. So there is no ability for any heat bed options within the controller itself. I'm sure you could flash new firmware to this. On that same note, it is Repeater 0.91. I probably slaughtered that's how you're supposed to say that, but Repeater, I don't know. I'm bad with stuff. But anyway, that's 0.91. Doesn't seem like the worst firmware in the world. It accepts Simplify 3D on the SD card just fine. All the standard G code that you would do with any other rep wrap seems to print it just fine. I have no real issues with the software. Tells you how long the printer's been printing if you haven't had a hard reset on it. It seems to be functioning just fine for me, at least without having the heat bed on it. I'm sure you could flash the board with any number of things that'll allow you to use a heat bed in the future if that's something you want to do, and I think I might try and do that. So bed leveling with wing nuts, it sucks. Always has, always will. Next. I like the controller, don't like the buttons. Never have, never will. It's just how it is. Within the hot end, when they drill and tapped the top of the hot end itself, when they did that, they left all the machining flakes within the throat body of the hot end. So I had to go in there and clean those out, because what was happening is I was putting filament through, it was coming through the PTFE tube, it would pick up some small pieces of film or pieces of aluminum that would carry down through the nozzle throat, and it would get embedded in the, right before it extruded out of the nozzle would then clog up with aluminum flakes, and you'd get a nozzle clog and you'd have to change it out. And I think I'm on my 3rd nozzle now because of this, because you can't really get in there to blow that out. Since I've replaced the nozzles a couple times, I think it kind of cleared out and it's printing much, much better. So my biggest problem with this printer review thus far has been when I first got the printer and hooked everything up, got the assembly done, the xaxis stepper motor that allows it to move left and right to move the hot end back and forth, that stepper motor was DOA, dead on arrival. So what happened was is I plug it in, get it set up, go to home all, go to, you know, whatever, it's, and all it would do is just go left and right real quick. one step right, one step left, one step right, one step like forward, back, forward, back, forward, back. So something obviously was wrong with the stepper or the board or something else. So what I decided to do was take a stepper. I had an extra stepper at the house, decided to hook that up in place of it and see if the board was telling the stepper, if the stepper driver within the board was actually giving out the correct commands, or if it was the stepper motor not interpreting those commands. And lo and behold, when I hooked up the other stepper motor, it actuated just fine, moving it forward, stepped all the way through towards the home command, you know, and it would go infinite until the end stop was pressed. So I knew that the stepper motor that came with it did not work anymore. And that's a problem because the way they have designed the X-axis carriage, the stepper motor is actually set up behind the X-axis. So the motor I had to replace had a long shaft of about 36 millimeters. Well, the normal NEMA 17s are what, like 20 maybe, not even, so about half that size for the shaft. So what I ended up doing was I designed and printed my own NEMA 17 extension pull gear, essentially, that kind of makes up that difference. So you can use a normal NEMA 17 motor if something was messed up. And if there's enough outcry of people having problems with their steppers that they want that included, I'll put that in there. So I did eventually get it printing. It is another caveat for the part 2, the print quality part of this review that I will talk about, that the print quality may suffer because I have a stepper motor that doesn't have an actual long arm. I have just a printed part, but so far cursory results show still printing pretty good. Pretty surprising, actually. So that is a big QC thing. Not really a fan of that. So that kind of gets rid of some of the negatives I experienced with this printer. We can go now through some of the pros of what I actually enjoy about the printer. I know it was kind of a little front loaded with the negatives, but I got to tell you what I'm experiencing with the printer. Like this, why I'm here. This is why this review occurs. I can also hope that Hoony kind of listens to it, make some iterations, and if they do, I'd be happy to try out any future iterations, because I want to tell you right now, even with all the problems I've had with this, I'm very impressed with this printer. It has been a lot of work, but still pretty impressed with this printer without having a heated bed as well. The first pro I'd like to say is the kind of the open design of it. It allows you to really access all the, even though wing nuts are horrible for leveling a bed, you can access these quite a bit. Like the bed will come all the way forward of the frame and all the way back of the frame. You can get the wing nuts on to adjust the height very well. That's a nice touch. I like that. That doesn't always happen with different printers. So the frame construction itself, this acrylic thing, I kind of scoffed at it at the beginning, but this is probably, and I'm not trying to exaggerate this, this is probably the strongest printer I have, which is pretty crazy to say, right? Because I have two CR10s and those are all metal extrusions. But the way this case and setup and base is designed, like, I'm a big dude. I think I could probably stand on it. Am I going to do it? No, I'm not going to do it. I'm just saying, probably could. There were parts not with acrylic that were already pre-assembled. That pre-assembly was pretty nice. It saved some time. It wasn't the best, but all this portion here on the Z-axis, all this was all together, the black area. The hot end assembly was pre-assembled, so I didn't have to do that, which was also very nice. So another positive of this is that it has a self-contained power supply. That power supply is, I think, outputting 12 volts at 10 amps. So it's a pretty hefty duty power supply. But you don't have to wire that directly to the board. What you have to do is wire the input from the back side of the printer into the main board, and then the main board will do all the conversion stuff. You don't actually have to touch the power supply at all. Basically the same arguments you would hear for the Tron XY X1. That's a very small kit printer without a heated build plate. Same basic arguments go for that printer as this one. No heated build plate, but there's all self-contained power supply. a lot bigger build space. You get an additional, I think that ends up being 60 millimeters or something on each axis with this printer over the X1. So there's arguments to be made on that, and I listened to them. The whole reason I decided to look at this printer was because of the linear rail system. I thought that is pretty cool. It's a lot of companies are trying to use it now, but I thought like, oh, this is like a budget-friendly version of that. I wonder how that affects print quality. The print quality I'm seeing in the first little bit of this has been pretty exceptional. For all of the problems that I've had to deal with and some of the issues that have come up in the build process, really, really impressed with the print quality for a machine like this. So that has to be a big part of that, I'm thinking anyway, has got to be that linear rail system and the amount of stabilization that kind of gives the printer overall, as opposed to, you know, like LM8 U's and stuff like that kind of got a little bit of slop in them. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully it helped inform your decision on a printer that you were probably searching around to look at. I don't think there's many other reviews on this printer, so hopefully I gave you some good information on that. Please comment below if you'd like to see something else or you'd like to know more, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. I am going to put affiliate links as well as non-affiliate links down for GearBest in the description down below. And if you decide that you do want it, if you do buy it, it helps out the channel. Appreciate you checking it out. Check out my Discord server. Got one set up. Pretty small community right now, but I'm kind of using it as like a forum type thing for the channel. So if you're into that, stop on over. We'd love to have you. Also, I'm on all sorts of social media. I pop those up right now, probably with a weird sound effect, like anything that doesn't really make the channel, as in project builds or anything. I usually throw those up on Instagram. I'm most active on there, but also Thingiverse or anything like that, hit me up and I'll hit you back. So yeah, until part 2, keep your amps up and your filament dry.